What's up, Gear Junkies? Welcome to Gear Talk. As always, I am your humble host, Jason Girallo. And on this episode, we talk a little bit about the Bugara Power Soak. All right, so if you have a tube amp that has more than, say, 5 watts of power, and you want to play it at bedroom volumes or with a acoustic set, then you're going to need something to scale down the power of your tube amp. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did a demonstration of the Fender Deluxe Reverb, and as I noted in that review, the one thing that stood out about that amp was the volume at 2 on the volume control at 2. It was just very loud, and to get it to break up gently using those tubes, you had to be about 7. I never managed to get it there without applying a little bit of Power Soak because it would have just been absolutely far too loud. I would have had to wear ear protection, tell my family to leave the house. It would have been far too much. That amp is 22 watts, so certainly nothing like a 100-watt Marshall, but that it is still far too powerful for bedroom volumes. I love my neighbors, and I'd like to keep them loving me back. And so with that, anytime I have a tube amp that is, say, above 5 watts of power, and I plan on turning it up, I absolutely feel like you need some sort of power attenuator to make that a reality. So this is the Bugara Power Soak. So Bugara is a subsidiary or alternate brand of Behringer. Now, Behringer is pretty well known for building kind of the cheap Chinese knockoffs of popular pedals. They build a line of all sorts of different audio equipment. In fact, in one of my previous jobs, I used Behringer as my desktop monitors. They were inexpensive and did a decent job. I wouldn't say that they are the world's greatest in quality, but they do offer quite a nice value proposition, especially for a device that is relatively simple. So what a Power Soak does, or an attenuator does, basically it allows you to input your amp's output, and then it uses a transformer to scale down the amount of power that is going to the speaker. So if you were to unplug your speaker from your power head in a combo amp, you would actually destroy the amp. It's not built to not have a load on it. And so this actually simulates the load of a speaker and allows you to control exactly how much of the final wattage gets to that speaker. So for this, it goes from 0 to 100. And what I noticed is at 100, which would be like fully wide open, it's still about 50% quieter than if it were not in the chain. But really great because it allows, in this case, both a full power attenuation from 0 to 100. So basically this will turn off your speaker completely if you have it all the way to 0. And then it allows for a line out. So on classic amps like the Deluxe Reverb, it does not have a line out. This would actually give you a line out. And what I love about that is it allows obviously easy recording into your computer. Now, what it does not have is some of the features of, say, the Captor X, which is probably the most popular on the market today. But for $100, this is really a pretty amazing piece of equipment. It's all metal, which I love. I think, metal, especially when you're talking about dealing with wattage and cooling, plastic is just not an efficient conductor of heat. This really allows any of the heat that's created when you're attenuating the power to disperse. In fact, this didn't even get warm in my hours of playing with it, just a little bit on the bottom, but that was after a long time use. But what I was saying is this does allow a line out, but there is no emulation. So there's no impulse responses. You can't connect this to a computer and load what you want your cabinet to sound like. So that is kind of a downside. But if you're plugging into your audio interface and then you're going to apply a cabinet effect on the back end in your DAW, then it's really not a big deal. The other thing that this allows, which is really what I used it for, is bedroom level practicing. So while it does make recording easier because it gives you a line out that you wouldn't have had otherwise, I love it because at 20, which is kind of where I like to leave it, I can crank up to all the way to 7, 8, or 9. It's kind of a beautiful thing because you're playing like a bit of a reverse ballet. So as you turn up the amp, you turn down the power soak. And it's really just that simple. A scale of basically 0 to 100 means you have kind of an infinitely adjustable, which I like better than a lot of amps that have built-in power attenuators, because in that case, usually you're going from full power to half power to quarter power kind of thing. So it doesn't give you kind of that infinitely adjustable situation, whereas with this, because it's on a scale of 0 to 100 and it's just a knob, you can make it exactly, you can dial in exactly how much you want to attenuate the volume while getting the tubes to scream at the level that you wish. So if you want it super clean, you can leave it fully open or at say 50% or whatever. It gives you a beautiful clean sound. If you turn those volume knob up on your tube amp to where you're starting to get a little bit of tube saturation, you can turn it down to 20, and then you have sort of the best of both worlds. You're getting that lovely tube distortion, but without blowing your ears out or waking the neighbors. And then all the way down to 0 or 2, or as low as you want to take this, you can almost practice at bedroom levels where you wouldn't even disturb people. Or you can turn it all the way off and go line in into a computer and use monitors to listen to your amp. So there's just a huge variety of things. Now this I purchased on Amazon. It was right about $100, I think $119. So that is just a tremendous value. Like I said, love that it's made out of metal. I think that it makes it much more efficient at dispersing the heat that is generated. And basically all you need is a speaker cable. So for most amps that are built kind of modern, they are wired to the speaker using just a 1/4-inch speaker cable. So that does make it pretty easy. You just unplug it from the head of your amp, plug it into here, and then kind of patch it with another speaker cable going into the amp. And easy peasy, you're off to the races. Now, if you have an amp that's directly soldered, it will take quite a bit more work because you're cutting cables, attaching plugs, etc. So check your amp before purchasing one of these. But for most, it is just plug and play. A couple of notes: it does not require external power, so that was something that I really love. No more additional wall warts. It's just plug in your speaker and plug in your speaker cable, and you're done. The other thing that I would really encourage you to make sure is that you're using a proper speaker cable. It is just absolutely vital. You do not want to use just your regular instrument cable. Yes, they look the same. Yes, they have the same connectors on the ends, but they are just not the same, and you will damage your equipment if you're using just a regular instrument cable. So I like to use the shortest cable possible for the jobs. So I have about 1.5 foot long speaker cable, and that's plenty just to go from sitting on top of the amp to the speaker. Now, if you want to put it on a board, on a pedal board, or somewhere else, then of course you'll need a longer cable. For me, I found 1.5 foot is really perfect. Less cable, the better. It keeps things neat and tidy. And like I said, without having a power supply attached to this, it really does make things really simple. A few downsides, like I mentioned, this doesn't have emulation. The power control knob, and I mentioned this in my review for the Fender amp, it's kind of gritty sounding. I don't really know why. It's not like lubricated, but it doesn't affect anything. It's just not the smoothest, most beautifully feeling knob in the world. It's also metal. In fact, the only piece of plastic on the outside of this is this little chicken knob here to control your line out. But everything else is metal. It feels really good in the hand. I'm really impressed with the Bugara Power Soak. So I found that every attenuator will impact the tonal quality of an amp to some extent, some more than others. The Bugara does impact it a little bit. It does tend to warm up the sound a little. So if you have an amp that is excessively warm already, or if you like to play a dual humbucker type guitar in the neck position where it's very warm already, it might be too warm for you. So your mileage may vary as far as what your exact tones are going for, but it's nothing that a little bit of EQ can't fix. So just a little bit extra treble and mid-range, and you'll kind of EQ the Power Soak completely out of the equation. The last thing is that the Bugara Power Soak does not handle amps greater than 100 watts in power. So if you have a 120 or larger amp, it is not for you. So I hope this video has been helpful. I think if you own a tube amp that has more than, say, 5 watts of power, that something like the Bugara Power Soak would be an essential tool in your toolkit. It allows you to get those beautiful distorted tube sounds that you're paying and dealing with all the fragility of a tube amp for without blowing out your windows or bothering your neighbors. Unless you need an interface or IR loading built in, then I think that the Bugara is absolutely the best value for the dollar. So with that, I hope this video has proved useful. Please like, comment, and share. Subscribe. I would really love to see this channel grow, and I will see you next time.